So I had a writing implement here a minute ago. Seems to have disappeared. Myself organized. Oop. So anything we should be talking about before we look at beeps today?
Um, no, not really. Sorry, I had to cancel on Friday.
No
Thanks for
problem.
rescheduling.
And so are the beeps from today or from yesterday or when?
These are from this morning.
These are from this morning. And this is going to be Tristan 9. And can you hear me adequately? And we all good as far as that's concerned?
Yep.
All right. Then I'm ready. Let's go look at beep number 1.
Okay, beep number one. I am feeling stomach pain. Um, I am conscious of listening to a podcast, and I'm having an array of anxious thoughts. Um, and let me see. My anxious thoughts are not directly in words, but there's something along the lines of that I'm anxious that I may not have anything interesting to share if the beeper beeps, or what if it's embarrassing because I might have to poop again, or what if or how would I talk about my listening to this podcast if it were to beep? Stuff like that.
So all related to the sampling process.
Right.
Okay. And is that it, those three things? Pain, podcast, anxious thoughts? Is that the end of the opening
Yeah, that's
salvo?
it. That's it.
Okay. And is any of those more prominent than any of the others? So I think, Tristan, you are frozen. Is he frozen for you too, Amber? It's apparently. Yes, we are good now. You were frozen, and I had just asked, is any one of these more prominent than the other? And you froze at that time. And it looks like you're frozen again.
Am I
Nope.
back?
Yes, now you're back.
Okay, cool. Hopefully this is better. I changed something, so
Okay. Is any one of those more prominent than the others?
I would say the anxious thoughts are slightly more prominent and the others are equal.
So 40, 30, 30, or something like that?
Sure,
50,
yeah.
50, 25, 25.
Yeah, 40, 30, 30 sounds good.
Okay. Well, let's start at the thoughts. So this is a variety of anxious thoughts, which I think I understand they're all concerns about what I might say if the beeper beeped.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And do they seem like a a bunch of simultaneous thoughts? Several independent but simultaneous thoughts? Or does it seem like one cloud of thoughts that I could say I could look at it from this perspective and get
Now, there does seem to be a succession, so I think I maybe thought one more prominently. Um, but I think at the time of the beep, I feel like I'm thinking about multiple possibilities that could go wrong. So it definitely seems like I have um, multiple. So, for example, the anxiety around my stomach and using the restroom, and the anxiety around having something interesting to say if I'm just listening to the podcast seems simultaneous.
Simultaneous and independent, or at least separable. Is that right?
Yeah, because maybe there may be separate scenarios, but it's kind of like two parts of the same thing.
Okay. So when I'm trying to tease apart, make sure I understand, it is like I got a pen, and I could say, well, the pen is red, and I could also say the pen is long, and I could also say the pen is vertical, and that would all be about the same pen, but it would be three separate thoughts. One is color, one is shape, one is directionality or something.
Mm.
So the question is, do these all seem about the same basic anxiety, basic about what to say if the beeper beeped, but separable thoughts about it?
Yeah, they seem somewhat separable.
Okay.
Um,
And at the moment of the beep, does it seem like there's two of them and maybe the others were sort of close by but previous, or does it seem like does it seem like a sort of a swirl and all these things are overlapping and maybe they're all simultaneous, but some
it
more
seems
prominent?
like an overlapping, but one of them may have been introduced later.
So does that mean that does that mean like one thought might have come and be gone, and another one come and gone, and another one at the same time, and another one at the same time but lasts longer?
Yeah, that
It-
seems likely.
Is
Yeah.
that sort of the way this seems to
Yeah.
be?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I think I'm good about that portion. Well, I guess I'm not quite good about that yet. So these are anxious thoughts, I understand. And is there a feeling of anxiety that seems separable from the thoughts? I'm not exactly sure how to ask that, but or does it seem like these thoughts themselves, this bundle of thoughts, is the anxiety itself?
Well, comparing to past samples, I would that the anxiety seems more clearly linked to the thoughts. So I would just say they're anxious thoughts.
So I have a bunch of anxious thoughts that together I can say, well, I was feeling anxious,
Yeah.
rather than saying, well, I was feeling anxious, and I could say, well, I was thinking this, I was thinking that, I was thinking this other.
Yeah.
Okay. And Amber, you got any more questions about that aspect?
No.
All right, then let's go to the podcast. So, am I listening to the podcast, or am I? What you said was I was conscious of listening to the podcast, and that locution, at any rate, is a little bit meta. It's like there's the listening to the podcast, and then there's the
Hmm.
noticing that I am listening to the podcast. Do you mean that in a I'm observing myself listening way? That's what
Hmm.
we call meta, or do you mean, well, I'm just listening to the podcast? I'm carried along by the podcast.
Well, I would say that I'm listening to the podcast without much comprehension. And since one of my anxious thoughts was about what would happen if a beep came and I had to describe my listening of the podcast. I would say that that is a sort of meta thought. Um, and as a matter of fact, I'm sort of like hearing all the words. So I'm hearing a lot of words and speaking, I guess.
So I'm hearing words and speaking without comprehension, with minimal comprehension, with no comprehension, with full comprehension.
Minimal, let's say minimal.
So it's not like it's totally meaningless, but I'm not really tracking it closely either.
Yeah.
Okay. And and I am noticing to some degree that that process is happening apparently. I am
Yeah.
I am in fact meta noticing that I am not fully attending to this kind.
Yeah.
Okay. And and you said I think I something like I heard the words of the podcast and does that mean that I hear like a stream of words or does it mean like I hear what the guy's saying? He's obviously speaking in words. And the distinction that I'm trying to make here is between do I hear a word and then another word and then another word and these are strung along like beads, but each one I'm like pearls on a necklace or something. I'm paying attention to this pearl and then or mildly paying attention, slightly paying attention to this pearl and then this pearl and then this pearl. Or does it seem like I'm hearing the guy speaking and not paying much attention to it?
Um, um,
So in my metaphor, it's like, do I see this woman wearing a pearl and then another pearl and then another pearl? Or do I see her wearing a necklace? That's
I
the,
think I'm kind of taking all the words in together, it's hard to discern for me at this point, but I'm not really listening word by word by word, even though I kind of hear a succession of words, but it's kind of feels like I'm hearing a lot of words. I don't know.
so
It's
it,
maybe this is not quite answerable for me.
it might not be answerable for you and it might not be answerable for anybody, but
Uh,
I think it is answerable for some people anyway. So the distinction I'm trying to get to is that does it seem like I'm hearing a meaningful stream coming at me, even though I'm not paying attention to it very closely, but if it seems like a meaningful stream, or does it seem like I'm hearing a word followed by a word followed by a word followed by a word?
hmm.
And if that's
I would say it feels like a meaningful stream that I'm not paying a extremely close amount of attention to.
okay, okay, and I'm not trying to say I prefer one of those answers to the other, which I don't. I just want to make sure that I understand what the
Yeah,
as best we can, and I would say the I'm totally capable of asking questions that don't have answers or that are
right.
not possible answer or not possible answers today or whatever. And part of the task that as I see it, is that we see how far we can get down these roads, and when the pavement ends and we're into the weeds or something, then
Mhm.
we'll back away from that. So then I'm feeling stomach pain,
Mhm.
and how's that in your experience?
Um, it's mostly it's I guess it's both cognitive and a physical thing since my thoughts sort of turn to since I associate it maybe with indigestion and since it informs my thoughts. So it's both a physical thing that that is sort of informing my thought at that moment. And it's sort of just a pain and not on the skin, but um, inside the stomach.
Mhm. And I'm not sure that I know how to ask this question either. So let's see. So does this seem like a physical sensation? I feel pain in my stomach, and then I analyze that and say, well, it's indigestion, and that sort of becomes part of the should I poop again swirl of my thinking.
Right.
Or does it seem like the original sensation is partially mental?
The former.
Okay. Then I think I am good about that.
Me as well.
Excellent.
Okay, on to number two.
Beep two.
Um, B2. Okay. Um, so I'm thinking the phrase or the words make picture um, and I'm conscious of listening to podcast, not with much uh, not with comprehension. Um, and I'm anxious about the fact that I've sent out an email with the wrong picture size. And I'm playing out a bunch of scenarios for how I'm going to make the picture smaller. And I'm sort of have this very slightly diffuse imagining of a website that converts pictures to smaller JPEGs.
Okay. And there's quite a lot of aspects of this one. Are there any pieces that are these all separable experiences, or is the imagining part of the email, or is the making the picture smaller related to the imagining, or I'm just trying to, or are these all
Um,
separable experiences, sorry.
I would say we could probably join the anxiety of sending out the wrong email and sort of wondering how I'm going to make the image smaller. Those seem kind of the same thing.
Okay.
Um, or at least in the way I'm thinking about it, it's sort of all part of this swirl of things and thinking about this specific thing.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. And then of these things, what part is the most salient in your experience?
Um, this sort of general anxiety about having sent out the image at the wrong size and thinking about how I'm going to correct that.
Okay. So by my count, we have four things, would you say?
I would say 4.
Four? Okay. So, and then the anxious thoughts is the most. Are the rest all the same, or is there other things that are higher than?
Well, I'd say the word make picture, that phrase, and there may be a in parentheses smaller, but the make picture are especially prominent of that that I'm thinking that's fairly prominent. Listening to the podcast is less prominent, and maybe the least prominent is the sort of mental image of the website.
Okay. So let's start with the anxious thing.
Right.
Um, so I think I understand the situation that about the email and all of that. Can you tell me how is this all present in your experience?
Well, it's not, um, well, there are words since the make picture is words, but I'm also thinking the thoughts sort of extend beyond those words.
Hmm.
So so I would say there is inner speech at the moment, but there's also thought that extends beyond the inner speech. So this is kind of all this thought about, and it's sort of like the last one where it's like there may have been a sequence to things popping up, but they're kind of right now all together in there. So I'm sort of thinking that, yeah, I'm sort of going through scenarios. I experiencing it as a sort of succession without a succession. So,
Okay.
thinking about ways to sort of shrink down this image. Do I have to convert it to JPEG? Do I maybe ask Julian to do it, etc.? That's my brother.
Okay.
So it's
So
sort of,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Um, I was gonna ask, so I hear that the make picture piece of this is the inner speech, and
Right,
this anxious part is this thinking or whatever of that without words.
right.
Okay. So, and then once again, are these thoughts, I heard, I think the word we used was succession without succession. So does it
Yeah.
seem like these thoughts are coming one after the other, but I just can't put any order to that? Or is it just one big kind of overarching anxiety? And when I
Yeah,
put words to it, I put all these things to it.
it seems like they maybe there is some sort of succession where some scenarios come after, but at the time of the beep, I'm sort of thinking it all at once.
Okay. And this makes it seem like a cognitive, analytical type process.
Well, it's quite cognitive, but it's also linked with sort of this affective anxiety around it,
Okay.
which I would say is sort of, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So if I'm understanding this part correctly, I'm anxiously thinking, anxiously cognizing maybe about this email, the picture size, or or sending the wrong email, how am I going to make the picture smaller? Should I convert it? All of this, and it's all just kind of coming one after the other, but it's also not in any type of order in any sort of way. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, okay. Cool. So then the second thing was this make picture. I hear that these are words there. I think earlier we said that it was inner speech, but I want to make sure I'm being careful about our description. So how is that present?
Yeah, it's present as it's sort of inner speech without it's sort of, how would I describe it? So it's not like I'm literally speaking it to myself, or it's not like I'm hearing it inside, and it's not like I'm writing it either, but so the words are sort of present to me.
So the words make picture. If I'm understanding what you said correctly, the
Yeah.
words make picture are just somehow there, not really spoken, not really heard, not read or written or anything like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's the word or the words, I guess, quote, make picture, or is it, you know, is that part of, it just sounded like those were, it's, first we had said it was like a phrase, then we said it was just two words. Are these two words no doubt connected to this whole deal about
Well,
the picture?
Because logically, I think make picture smaller is the entire phrase, but in my mind, make picture stands out more prominently than the smaller. Maybe I hadn't gotten to smaller yet, so
Okay.
maybe it was just make picture.
So I'm in the process of make picture and I haven't gotten to smaller yet. Am I getting that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Maybe,
And
maybe,
possibly,
maybe,
possibly.
yeah,
okay,
possibly, or maybe he said
possible.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
So we don't want to clean up or make more logical his experience than it actually is. And that's not,
right.
I'm not to criticize his logic. I'm just saying
Yeah.
it would make sense for it to be make picture smaller, but that doesn't mean that that's the way it was experienced.
Right.
Okay. Is there, and it was quote or make picture question mark smaller, whatever. And do these words have any meaning to them at the moment, or are they just words present in my experience? No doubt they're about all of this stuff, but
They had the meaning that was associated with them, so yeah,
okay.
it was
Okay.
part of the anxious thinking, I guess.
Okay. Do you have any more questions about that? Okay. And then the third part is the podcast. So again, a similar question. Is this podcast, am I hearing it as I'm going by? Am I aware that I'm aware that the podcast is going and I'm listening to it and I'm not paying much attention to it?
Yeah, it's sort
What's,
of like of a background consciousness that a lot of words are being spoken.
okay. A lot of, so when you say background consciousness, like somehow I'm aware that I'm, these words are going on, I'm listening to them, but I'm not
Right,
picking them up.
right.
Okay.
So that was a meta question, and I'm not sure he meant it
Yeah.
as meta. Maybe he did or not. So the question is, are the words going by and I am aware of them, or is it that I am aware of the fact that words are going by? That second would make it meta. The first would be there's just some words going by, and when you ask me about them, I can say, well, yeah, somewhere in my consciousness there are these words going by.
I think the former.
Which was the former? I can't remember which.
Oh, maybe the
So,
um
so meta or not? That's the question. Does it seem like I am somehow analyzing this and recognizing that I'm not?
no, it's not meta.
Okay. So the podcast is the podcast words are somehow going by, and I'm not paying much attention to them.
Right.
Hmm.
And then I've got a question about the words. So does this seem like words going by, or does this seem like meaning going by? Like, do I hear word going by, or do I hear, well, whatever podcast I listened to, the president was saying this, but I'm just not paying attention.
Um Words plural. So I don't know if I'm picking out each word by word. I'm just sort of hearing that a whole bunch of words are going by.
So in my metaphor from the previous beep, this is more like seeing a bunch of pearls going by rather than seeing a necklace going by.
Right.
Okay. Then I think I am good.
There's a more part.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Right.
so the imagining of the website, diffuse imagining of the website, how was that in your experience?
Well, it's a little hard to put down since it is very
Hmm.
diffuse, but there may be certain attributes that I see, such as a search bar that you put something into, um, and possibly a button that says download PDF or something. Um, but it's quite vague.
Okay. And by vague, does that mean like it's so little of my experience that I can't really I know it's there, but I can't really say what it is? Is it vague like it's not a complete image? Is it vague like it's just I can't really get it?
Not a complete image, I would say.
Okay.
And is this a seeing, an imaginary seeing experience? I'm seeing a search bar, I'm seeing a button, or is it I'm somehow knowing that there would be a search bar and I know that there'd be a button even though I don't actually see it, even in my imagination? Or is this too far down into the,
Well, it's definitely not a clear seeing. It's sort of like a it's like a sort of imagined seeing.
so this is why the game that we're playing is difficult. So we're understanding that the whole thing is imagined. All this stuff is in my
Right.
imagination somehow. So
No,
the
yeah,
question,
that's correct. It's all in the imagination.
and so by saying it's imagined, do I mean that even when we're in the realm of the imagination, that this is less visual than it might otherwise have been?
It has some visual elements, but it's not like it takes over my
Okay.
yeah, but it's far enough down that it's not like I'm just like closing my eyes and picturing the scene, you know.
Okay. Then I think I'm good. On to number three.
On to number three. Um, my friend is, as a matter of fact, speaking, and I pick out the phrase strong desire she's saying, and that's especially prominent. It may be the last word she said, um, it's definitely I sort of pick up I sort of latch onto it. Um, so I'm not sure if they were the last words she said exactly, but there's definitely a latching onto those specific words, strong desire. So that's one element. The other element is I'm thinking, have these sort of anxious thoughts about if going to see this movie alone is worth it, if the movie is worth it, sort of that kind of, yeah, that sort of that. And that's it, just those two elements. Now, yeah.
Okay. So uh, the swirl of thoughts and the strong desire, either one of those more prominent?
Um, I would say about equal.
Okay. So let's start with strong desire then. So my friend, and can we give her a name? Doesn't have to be her name, but something we can call her rather than just my
Sure,
friend.
Emily. And I should also say, maybe I should add that I've also registered with comprehension sort of what Emily is saying in this phrase beyond just strong desire. She's saying that she doesn't want to go to the movie with me. So I've kind of comprehended that, and I'm picking out the words strong desire, especially from what she said. They seem a little more prominent to me.
So,
Anyway,
so is that to say that she is saying something, I don't have a strong desire to go to the movie with you, or something like that? And out of that, I have latched onto the strong desire portion, but but both I have comprehended what she has said, and I'm latching onto those words.
yeah,
Okay. And is it possible to say more about the latching onto? What is it? Is it those words just seem more prominent, or do I repeat them to myself, or
they just seem more prominent.
and does it seem like I've got sort of two streams of experiences coming from Emily. One is sort of the whole meaningful stream, and one is I freeze this strong desire thing, latch onto.
Yeah.
And and I'm and I'm I don't have a theory about how this stuff works, so I'm trying to understand how that. So the meaning continues to come, I guess, is what the meaning continues to come, but the words seem latched onto.
Right.
Is that is that the gist of it or the heart of it?
Right.
Okay. Okay. And then there are a bunch of thoughts about maybe I should go myself. Is it worth it? No, no, maybe I don't want to go.
Yeah.
They're all these thoughts are about whether I should go to the movie, about the movie.
Yeah.
Okay. And and are there more than two, or does it seem like there's just should I go alone? Is it worth it?
Um, I would say it's basically that. So I wouldn't say there's more than I would just say, yeah. I
So
would
there,
say it's just thinking about whether it's worth it to go to this movie alone if no one else wants to go with me.
okay. And and this is in not in words, I gather.
No.
And so does this seem like one thought? And the thought is basically, is it worth it going to this movie alone if nobody wants to go with me? Or does it seem and then when I have to tell these guys about it, I can say, well, it's should I just go alone? Is the movie worth it or whatever? But does it seem like one thought and I have to say several aspects to it? Or does it seem like a swirl of sort of separable but related, maybe not swirl, but an overlappingness?
Yeah, if for some reason when I wrote it, it seemed kind of like they had this overlapping quality to it. Maybe because it's not, yeah, it seems like it's too somehow diffuse just to say it was this thought exactly, because it feels like, yeah, it feels like it has this overlapping quality to it.
Okay. Then I think I'm good. On to number four.
Yep, beep four.
Or, okay, so I am reading a text and with comprehension, I'm feeling sort of like stuffy and like I have to sneeze. Um, I'm having anxious thoughts about sort of the convoluted nature of this sentence and what that means for me as an academic. Um, and there are sort of like a bunch of some maybe associated thoughts that are hard to pin down with that, like will I be able to write like this? Do I want to be able to write like this? Do, do I want this to be my area of expertise? Um, and I'm also thinking about the nature of when thought becomes reflective or self-conscious. So I'm sort of thinking about what happens when a thought comes into being, um, or sort of this thought becoming, um, I'm sort of thinking about in academic terms about what I'm reading, sort of about thoughts being the ground or the horizon, and then that becoming the consciousness itself becoming the ground against which it can emerge as a figure.
Okay.
But it's sort of like I'm wrestling with it. So I'm wrestling to comprehend this, and it's sort of maybe it's coming into greater comprehension at that moment, but I still don't really understand.
Okay. So if I'm getting this right, are these three or four things? So is this anxious thinking and the thinking about what happens, wrestling with comprehension, is that one thing? Or are those two separate streams of stuff?
I think the two
Separable, not necessarily separate.
separable, yeah.
Okay. And of these, which is the most salient in your experience? I guess of
Um,
all four.
I think the thinking about my sort of wrestling with the meaning of the phrase I'm reading is the most prominent,
Okay. And
which
then,
is no, which oh, that kind of describes two things. The last thing I described is the most prominent.
okay. And then is everything else about the same, or is it's one more than the other?
I would say the anxious thoughts about the convolution of the sentence is fairly prominent. I feel that maybe the feeling stuffy and is a little less prominent.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. All right, so let's start about the thinking about the comprehension, wrestling with the comprehension piece. Um, how is that present in your experience?
oh, sorry, I'm going to turn this off. That is present as, um, huh, I, there's almost this sort of spatial element to it, as in sort of like, this is a difficult one to describe. Uh, so it's sort of like I'm seeing something emerging out of like this, um, seeing something emerge, something is diffuse, and then something emerges, and then that something is, let's just say there's a vague spatial element to a vague spatial element to it. Has
Okay.
yeah, very vague. Um, there's a um, it's all very half-formed coming into form in a weird way, but I'm sort of imagining something that's half-formed coming into form. Um, yeah.
Um, and is this a visual experience, or is this bispatial, or are these, is that like you say like I see this coming into, I can't remember the word you used, but like seeing this something, imagining this, is that like a metaphor for what's happening, or is that I'm actually seeing these things
There's
emerge?
something very diffusely visual that I can't put into words about it.
Okay.
And was that present at the moment of the beep? That
Yeah,
visuality?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And can you tell me again what you see?
Um, Not really. I can just say that there's something vaguely visual about it.
So it's vaguely visual. I guess I'm trying to get a sense of what vaguely visual, but I can't describe what I see because I can't quite get it.
Mm.
Okay.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Um, and is this also a, is this vaguely visual and also a cognitive or affective type of thing? Or is this purely just this vaguely
No,
visual?
no, it's mostly cognitive. It's mostly a cognitive
Okay.
process that has a sort of vaguely visual component that I um, can't quite describe.
Okay. A cognitive struggle I'm hearing. Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Herbert, do you have any questions about that?
You can find.
No? Okay. All right. And then the next part was the anxious thoughts about this convoluted sentence, what it means. How is that in your experience?
Right. I would say that that is, as in the previous samples, like there may have been a succession, but now it's just all kind of like a thing. Um, and it's 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 both an affective and a cognitive process, and it's an anxious thought as well, and it's sort of linked to this diffuse bodily anxiety.
So there's a diffuse. So if I'm understanding this correctly, is this different than I'm anxiously thinking? There's like a diffuse bodily anxiety and the thoughts and they just seem inseparable in some way?
I guess it's the same thing.
So I'm anxiously thinking,
Yeah.
do I want this to be my area of expertise? Am I able to write like this? Things like that. And they're just kind of, they seem there's a successive process, but I can't quite put them in what order. Is this like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Hobart, do you have anything about this one?
Yeah, I do, and I may have missed what it is you said as I've been trying to figure this out.
Okay.
So, is it the case that in this situation, not I don't know how to ask this question either, but it is it the case that it seems like I'm reading text with comprehension
Mhm.
on another layer of that comprehension is wrestling with what it is that this text is trying to say. It's trying to say something about there's ground, and then this figure becomes the thought. I'm trying to figure that out.
Right.
And then on top of, and that is sort of aimed at the text in a way.
Right.
And then on top of that is another layer that is sort of meta to the second layer, which is, do I want to write like that? Is this good for me? My, do I like,
Right.
is that, so is this like layers of the onion sort of? There's the text in the middle, and then there's one layer that's about what does this text mean? And then another layer that's about the, this personal significance for Tristan.
That sounds about right. I mean, layer implies that one thing's over the other. I'm not sure there when one's over the other
Okay.
since the, but yeah, that sounds about right.
so we don't want to get too caught up in my metaphor, in the details of a metaphor, I think in general, sort of speaking, but but it's it's some form of meta thinking about the text and some form of meta thinking about my thinking about the text, it seems like.
Um, yes, yes.
Then I think I've understood what is being said here.
Okay.
And what I was trying to work it back. So it seems like most of this are in in the samples today is something about a swirl of anxious thoughts. I keep saying swirl, which is probably not fair, but a collection or a something of meta of thoughts that are in some way about what I'm doing.
Right,
There's the directness of what I'm doing, and then there's a some thinking about that.
right. Yeah,
And in this one, there's yet another layer,
yeah,
thinking about the what I'm doing.
right.
Okay, I'll have to pull that thread of the yarn through when I go back and look at the transcript. But that's the way it seems to me at this moment.
Okay.
These things are complicated, and it's hard to keep track.
Yeah,
Okay, and there is the stuffiness.
right.
Okay. How is that in experience?
That's mostly, I would say, a bodily feeling. Um, and it's just sort of a feel like almost as if there's a pressure maybe in my nose or maybe yeah, just sort of feeling of a tightness in that area.
Okay, so a pressure, tightness in the nose, is that like this, I guess, well, it's a
Maybe
small
it's
area.
maybe it's also that a feeling of needing to sneeze, which is sort of this. How do you describe the feeling of needing to sneeze when it's not that strong at the moment? Yeah, just sort of like something. It's something.
Okay.
And,
I think I understood you to be saying this is not too strong at the moment. So is that to say that it's not like I'm sneezing, I guess, right? It's just kind of it seems small, or is it that this is not really part of my experience? Or the sensation seems maybe.
it's not a strong need to sneeze. Um, it's almost like a slight need to sneeze or like a slight, kind of stuffiness. And it's not that most of my thought is taken over by other things. So this is
Okay.
just a small aspect of it.
Okay, like yes, so like a not too strong of a sensation, like a small sensation. Okay.
Right.
Anything else about that?
And I'm gathering that this is not cognitive. This is a bodily sensation.
Yeah.
And so it's not like I am thinking I need to sneeze. It's I am experiencing this bodily sensation. And when I explain it to these guys, I have to say, well, it's like a mild, I have to sneeze.
Right.
Is that right? So
Yeah.
totally bodily.
Totally bodily. Yeah.
Okay.
Then I'm
And
good.
I wanted to check one more thing before we end the speak here. I understood that as of that I am in fact reading some kind of text as that's going by. Is that just that's something I'm doing is a fact of the universe, or is that at all part of your experience, this reading thing?
Mm, Wow. Um,
And here again, we're pretty far down the list, so let's not get too
Yeah.
concerned about it.
yeah, I'd say that I'm somewhat, um, I have some awareness that I'm reading, though I'm not having like a thought about that I'm aware that I'm reading.
Okay.
So that is a meta statement. I am aware that I'm reading. It's not just that I'm reading with comprehension. It's that I am somehow aware that I am reading. Is that what you mean to be saying?
Mm, maybe let's just say I'm reading.
Okay. So I don't want to talk you out of that, but there are, it's sort of in the realm of the theories that you're talking about at the end of this beep here. There are theories that say, you got to be aware of yourself as reading if you have any kind of awareness at all, but I don't think that's true. And so or let's put it this way, I have, I am an agnostic about whether that's true. But what I would like us to do is to not presume a meta awareness if there isn't a meta awareness there.
Okay.
If there is one there, as we have seen, when there is one there, I'm all over trying to understand what is there. But I don't want us to fall into the trap of saying, well, if I was reading with comprehension, well, I must have been aware of that I was reading with comprehension. I don't think that's necessarily true.
All right.
On to number, well, I guess we are at 1059 here.
Yeah, and that's all the beeps I collected anyways.
Okay.
So.
All right. Then we're coming out even. So shall we do this again?